Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be starting a new project where we swap a 1977 Ford F250 Dentside body onto a 2005 Ford SuperDuty chassis using a new kit that we're debuting, which makes this swap super simple and easy to do within a weekend. So our donor truck's back there. It's a 77 Ford Super Cab, and to get to it we need to get this truck out, which will be a future project. So that's also going to get SuperDuty swapped, and there's going to be a 12-valve Cummins and a ZF 6-speed in that, which has a pretty nice classic paint job on it. Here's our donor truck. It's a fairly rust-free 77 Ford F250. Has a few dents, original paint, nothing special. It's been sitting. I picked this up a few years ago. It has a bad engine in it, which is perfect for what we're doing because we're doing a whole new engine, drivetrain, all that stuff. Starting to get some rust coming through the paint, but if we clean that up, it should be good. Interior's not perfect. We're going to be doing a new front seat for sure. Not sure about the rear seat. It has some rust in the floorboards there. Yeah, it's still solid. We might do some patchwork there. The fronts are still pretty solid. There's some holes starting there. The floors aren't perfect, but the rest of the truck, it's pretty solid. But we're not looking for looks. We're just looking for a work truck that's gonna... Ooh, that shuts really nice. Anyway, to start, we need to get this truck out of here. Gonna grab my tractor and a winch, pull this truck up there, and then pull this one out. The back's been used for storage for some wood. We end up getting that out of there. We also need to, before we take the body off of this, we need to take some measurements and mark axle center line on the body, just so that part of this is to confirm when I get the body swapped on the new chassis that the axles line up where I want it to. And I'm pretty specific about that. I want them within 1/8 of an inch. There's some people that'll say, oh, 2 inches off is fine, but I want this to be correct. This truck here is actually my first prototype, and it actually looks pretty good there, but when I measured this one, the center line was off about 3/4 of an inch. So I went and redesigned some stuff, moved some stuff back, but this is kind of how it's going to look. This one is a 75 body onto a another 05 chassis. And this one actually was a short box. I was seeing if I can get away with doing that, and it worked out. So. All right, so I got the truck moved down here to a level spot on our driveway. Got the stuff cleared out of the back, and it's kind of sitting empty here. The engine's still in it, and the reason for what we're doing here is to get a baseline before pulling it off and putting it on the other chassis. We want to see where the correct center line is for the front axle and also for the rear. So I'm going to put a laser level on here, line up with the front hub there, and do measurements off of some points on the fender there and mark it, and do the same thing on the rear. That way when I put the body onto the new chassis, I can double check to make sure everything is correct and that it's in the right position on the chassis. So these pieces here are pretty much everything needed to modify the chassis to get the Dentside body to fit on it. Well, on this side here is all the cab and bed mounts, and over here are the cut templates and the gussets. And I've said it before, or might have said it before, but what's unique about this is everything locates off of existing holes, bolt holes and stuff like that on the frame. So you bolt it on, cut it or weld it, and everything is in the correct location. There's no measurements needed. So we'll start as you would start with doing the process. You start with the frame jig here, or the cut jig. It has existing holes that align it onto the frame, and it has some spots to pilots to drill new holes. But you bolt this on each side and you cut down these slots here, and that's the correct distance there to shorten the frame for whatever configuration you're trying to go with. So you bolt that on, cut it, take this off, clean everything up, bevel your welds, all that stuff, and then you bolt this on, and that goes on the back side, and it squares everything up, brings it into the right distance apart, and then you do a vertical butt weld on the frame. Then you take that off, grind down that surface of the weld, and you bolt on this gusset using the 4 holes that you drilled off of this one here. You do rosette welds in these slots here, and then you do welds around the perimeter, and that finishes the frame modification. So you shortened it, butt welded it, and you put on the gusset, and that's done. Then we go over to the body mounts. And again, these locate off of existing holes. So this one here is the front cab mount. You have 2 bolt holes on the frame that those line up with. You bolt that on, it's located correct front and back and elevation, all that stuff. And you go ahead, weld it around, you bust off that tab, because it's just tack welded on there, finish the welding, and you do that for all these. Every single one of these brackets has a removable jig tab. So you do all that, and that finishes the conversion. Now you go ahead and bolt on the Dentside body. So this is the frame we're using. It's from a 2005 Ford F250. It's a super cab long bed, so it pretty much matches the configuration, but just a little bit longer in the wheelbase. It had a junk 5.4 in it. Got it cheap that way. Pulled everything off. Still need to pull off the exhaust and some other things, but this is what we're starting with. Already pressure washed it, cleaned it up pretty well. This here is our cut template, which I'll set on here and show you how easy this is. We got some holes here that are going to line up with that there. And after we clean this up, it'll just slide on there. Looks like I need to make a revision to this to clear that rivet there. Super simple to do. But anyway, this goes on there. You bolt it on with some holes and you just cut the frame. And then we weld on all the other stuff, and then that body right there will bolt right on here. All right, so I got the rolling chassis inside the shop here. Before I brought it in, I went ahead and pressure washed this, got it all cleaned up the best I could, got the exhaust taken out of it, and I already had the engine and transmission removed from this thing. So now my shop floor is pretty level, but I do have a drain down here, so it has a little bit of a slope into it. So we'll have to compensate for that when blocking it. But before we start cutting or anything like that, we want to make sure this thing's level. They got a 4-foot level here. It's pretty close. This side could go up a little bit, mostly because it's sloped. What we're first going to do, put some blocks underneath the axles, front and rear, kind of suspending this a little bit. Then I'm going to go ahead and put some jack stands on here to support the frame, so that when we cut this, it doesn't fall down, and also that way we can level it all out. I went ahead and got the chassis all supported with jack stands. Right now the main concern is the front section, because it's going to be stationary after we cut the frame in half here, and then we'll move the rear section forward. So I went ahead and leveled it the best I could right now. I want to level it at each point that there are jack stands, because the frame will twist. So we leveled it here, and then we went ahead and leveled it up front here. Now you don't get a whole lot of fine adjustment with jack stands, but the thing we can do is put some shims underneath there. So like this piece right here, just some scrap metal that I stuck underneath there and stack up some different thicknesses of scrap metal. You can kind of see over in here. Also wood shims work the same. So that fine adjust the position of the support to get it leveled out. Now we got that all taken care of. We're going to work on prepping the frame for cutting. We set the frame jig up here onto the frame, and going to mark it where we need to clean up all this, whether it's rust or some of this is going to be like a underbody spray. I mean, you get all the way off of there and down to the bare metal, so when we do welding and stuff like that, it's clean to work with. Another thing on this side is we have fuel lines, brake lines, and also electrical. The brake line does have a union up here, so we can go ahead and disconnect it there and just kind of peel it back out of the way. I'll take this off here. These bolts here are bolts to hold the hardline brackets on, so we'll go ahead and take those off, and that'll allow that whole thing to peel back and out of our way. Once you get it all put back together, then we can worry about maybe shortening the brake line and some of this other stuff. So the cut jig positions right in this section of the frame, right as it dips down underneath the cab here in front of this cross member. We'll go and mark this and then get it prepped for cutting. Now that the frame is cleaned up, it's not perfectly down to bare metal, but that's all right. We got a lot of the junk off of it. It's time to put the cut template on. And for this, we're gonna align it. We can see these two holes here, kind of in an upward angle. They line up with these ones here. We got this bigger one that lines up right underneath this rivet here, and then some of these other ones line up down here. So we'll slide this on best we can. Then we'll use some punches and get everything lined up here. We got the set on, and now we're gonna go ahead and secure it by bolting those holes, and won't bolt into this one because we have to drill that one out. We'll bolt through these ones and those ones there. That hole, and this hole over here are going to be 3/8, and this one here is going to be 1/2 inch. But the holes inside the frame are a little smaller, so we're going to go ahead and drill those out. These ones with the 3/8 drill bit, and this one with the 1/2 inch. Over here. Unfortunately, my audio quit working, so I'll sum up these next few clips. These features in the template are a guide for new holes that need to be drilled. They start by guiding an 1/8 inch drill bit in for the pilot hole. You'll then increase the size up to a 1/2 inch. I prefer to use a step drill bit for the final size, but a regular drill bit can be used. With the new holes drilled, it's time to cut the frame. The slots in the template are the cut locations. I recommend using a corded sawzall and a new blade. These frames are about a 1/4 inch thick and take a while to cut through. So now that the frame is cut, we're going to go back and see if there's any spots that we didn't get flush with this tab. And if there is, we'll go ahead and touch those up with the grinder to make sure everything is up to this plane. There's a spot down this corner right here that might touch up, and go ahead and go over to the other side and take a look. But pretty much we want the frame not to protrude any farther out past this jig, because those two parts are going to touch when we move this together, or theoretically this is going to come off. But we want this to have a little bit of gap in there and not keep it from going to the right distance. So now that we got the cut template off the frame, we're going to go ahead and clean up this and prep it for welding. I'm going to do a 45-degree bevel, about half the thickness on both sides of the frame, and then clean up about 1 inch down to bare metal. We still got some mill scale on the frame, so clean that up so we got a nice clean weld. And also the inside the frame here, this one just has some light surface rust, but we got a jig that's going to go from that bolt hole to these bolt holes here. So this whole surface we want to have clean, and then especially this welding surface inside here, because we might come back in and do some welding on the inside. So just want to prep all of this for welding right now when it's easy to get to. So I got the frame all prepped for welding, got bevels on it on both sides, clean up the inside, also beveled, well, at least got the burrs off of all these holes, both outside and inside, so the jig will sit flush against there. Now time to roll the chassis forward and get that jig bolted on the inside. So to make it easier to move this rear section forward, I went ahead and attached some ratchet straps on both sides of the frame to help pull it together, and I'm supporting the front with the floor jack. So I tightened those down, it should bring it together. One downside is one of my, I think that real wheel over there, the brake's dragging, so I'll have to manhandle it, but this is a simple way to kind of bring it together, especially if you're doing it by yourself. So with the frame being pretty close together, we can adjust the height with the floor jack here. And then we're gonna go ahead and put this inner jig on the inside of the frame. This tang goes to the back on this one, and we'll do one side, then switch over the other side. Then we'll go ahead and use this alignment punch to pull everything together. If for some reason you have too tight of a gap and the frame won't move together correctly, go ahead and grind it down so that you can line up the holes and the frame will be in the right location. Now I got this side loosely set on here, I'll go over to the other side and put that jig in before I tighten everything down. So with the jig installed, I went ahead and snugged up the bolts. I still left it a little loose so that they will move around a little bit because we still have to adjust level on the whole frame. I went ahead and re-leveled the front of the chassis, moved just a little bit, whether it was from beating around, moving stuff together, but re-leveled it this way and also this way. I ran the torpedo level right about in this area here, because this is one of the planes that's level on the chassis, and then I took this longer level and ran it across to make sure it was level in that way, and I did in each point that there's the jack stands. So up front here, same thing. And then once this was solidified, I went ahead and raised up this part of the chassis so it was really close to flush right there. And then I leveled that, well, didn't have to level that side to side because it'll square up to this here. And then went ahead and jacked up. I think I actually had to lower the back, but adjusted the back here, made sure it was level in that plane there. And then I ran the torpedo level in this position on both sides of the chassis. You can also run it in this section here. Those are a couple of the planes, and also back here would be another plane that would be level. Now that the chassis is all level and squared up, I'm gonna go ahead and stick some angle iron on here to bring and clamp it down multiple places with some C-clamps to make this top level in the same plane on both sides. I'll give you a rundown of what we did here. Again, we put this angle iron on here, clamped it down, tightened down the bolts here, made sure they're good and snug, and then put another clamp right on the weld joint to make sure it was all brought together there and not spaced out at all. So now that all the clamps and everything's on here, I'm gonna go ahead and toss some tack welds on here and then take off some of these clamps, but still leave this inner jig bolted on there. I got some tack welds tossed on both sides of this. Next step is to take this top angle iron off and this clamp here. Probably what I'll do is reposition the clamp right about in there and then right about in there on both sides. The next step will be welding, but before that, what I'm gonna do is the sections that I cut out are gonna be practice welding. I already beveled these, gonna set them up over on the bench, tack them together with the 1/8 inch gap in there, and I'm gonna run a practice weld on here. So that's a good thing to do, is use some scrap metal and get a few practice welds down before attempting this weld here. So now that the welding is done, I'll let that cool, and then we'll go ahead and grind this down, because we got to fit this plate flush to there. So there'll be a little bit of this still left over, but a lot of this underneath is going to get ground down flush. So the welds have been ground down on both sides of the frame here, on this side here and on the underside. It's important to note that you want to do your grinding perpendicular to the weld, not parallel with the tip going down this way, but across it. That's because it will make these little scratches on the surface, and if you go this way, there's a chance that you will create a stress concentration and cause this thing to crack later on. So make sure you maintain your grinder that way. So this done, the next step is to weld this outer gusset on here. But first, gonna hold this up here. It's gonna use the same bolt holes as everything else. You want to clean the metal down around this whole outside edge here, and also where these rosette welds are going to be. So I'm going to mark that up and then go ahead and clean it down to the bare metal. Got the gusset bolted up to the frame. Before I did that, went ahead and cleaned everything off and got the inner jig removed. One thing to note, if you got some good penetration on that, you might have some small tack welds onto this plate. So I had to go through some of the holes in the frame and punch this off. One thing I did is I have a pneumatic air hammer, so it knocked it off pretty quick. The other side fell off, but just something to keep in mind that this might be stuck on there. You'll have to knock it off. Now for welding this gusset on, it's tempting to do a full bead all the way around this, but we don't want to do that because with the frame, it's going to flex as you go down the road, and if we do a full weld, it's going to create stress concentrations. You do not want to weld the bottom flange, even though it's going to be tempting. You want that free to flex and take up the stresses. Also, you want to space 1 inch from the bottom of the flange here on both sides, and also 1 inch from these corners not to weld. And what we're going to do is do a 2-inch weld, 2-inch space, 2-inch weld, 2-inch space, so forth. Here it's not perfect, so on the top we have 2-inch welds marked out, and we have about 1.5 inch space, 2-inch, 1.5 inch, 2-inch. On the side, I marked out 1.5 inch weld, 1.5 inch space, 1.5 inch weld. So weld the spots on the outside, and then we'll come back in and fill in these for the welds. Some of these caught some holes in the frame, so we're going to go in from the back side, fill in that hole, and then do this weld. I finished the welding on the frame gusset, did the perimeter welds, and then filled in the rosette welds, and I decided to go ahead and grind them down, just kind of give a more flush look on this plate. The next step is to do inside welds on this original weld joint. So this side over here got cleaned up to show you. We got pretty good penetration all the way through, but just we want to run another weld on this just to have a good solid weld on this joint. So went ahead and beveled this with a die grinder to get a little bit of a bevel in there for a little better penetration. Now that everything's finished up on shortening the frame, it's time to move on to installing body mounts. But before we get to that, we need to cut off these old mounts. So we got this rear cab mount here, front cab mount, and then these body bushings on the frame. So we'll start with cutting off the cab mounts, then we'll come back to that body bushing. So on the passenger side, you can go ahead and just cut these off and then grind the welds down flush with the frame. On the driver's side or the left side, we don't want to cut the whole bracket off because you can see here, it holds part of the parking brake. So we're going to probably cut that section there and then leave kind of like a tab right here. This part here, that's just kind of a guide or a pass through. So we'll notch that out and allow the cable to come out of that before we cut it off. And then coming back to this one here, looks like it also has a retainer right there. So again, we'll probably leave part of that tab there and cut the rest of this off. So the old cab mounts are cut off on both sides and ground down, and this is what I ended up with, some tabs for the parking brake cable. Next step is removing these front cab, I guess it'd be core support isolators. We'll start with this one here. They have a rubber lip around here that has to be cut off, and you use a razor blade to kind of cut around there, and this is what you end up with. And this here is the nut for it. And it has these little cutouts on, and there's probably a special tool for that. What I found out works good is a spindle nut socket, I guess you'd call it. This is for like a half-ton Ford or that series of front hub. There's the performance tool part number W1273. It's for a 2.5-inch spindle nut. If you don't have one, usually parts stores will rent them out, like O'Reilly's or AutoZone. Put a deposit down, borrow it, and you bring it back once you're done. So those little tangs will engage that there, and then you use an 18mm socket to go through the bottom of the frame here. And if I can get a good view from the inside here, socket inserts through the bottom there and engages that bolt there. So you loosen it from underneath while holding that there. There we go. There's part of the bushing in there that you'll have to fish out with a magnet, but that's not too bad. With those front core support bushings moved, it's finally time to start installing body mounts. These are the front core support mounts we'll be installing. In the kit, these gussets will just be tack welded to the main mount. You'll have to do the finish welding. You can do that either on a bench or once they're welded onto the frame. So both brackets are a mirror image of each other. The left side will look like this, and it'll have the tab coming out on this side. On the driver's side here, we'll be aligning this large hole with that large hole in the frame. We'll slide on like so, and we will clamp this on. We're going to need to mark this out to clean up for welding along this edge here, the back, and down this side here. We don't need to do any cleaning around where this tab is because it will come off. On the passenger side, we're going to be aligning this small hole with that small hole there. It's not necessarily to put a bolt hole through these, but you can, at least on this side here. And again, we'll clamp these on after cleaning up the area around them. With the frame cleaned down to bare metal, it's time to align the bracket onto the frame. First start with aligning this hole here. On the left side, it's the big hole. And then put a level on top of the bracket to level it out. That's why we want to leave this whole frame still on jack stands to make sure it's all still level. So we leveled this out, and then we'll go ahead and put some tack welds to hold that in position. And the same thing will go to this side. I got C-clamp on this side too. I'll go ahead and align that hole there and then level this out and then put some tack welds on it. Now we got this pretty well secured on here, we can knock this bracket off. We'll start with the chisel. Get that pried away. And then grab some pliers. Work it back and forth. There we go. So the front brackets are fully welded. I went ahead and did the outside and the inside welds all the way around, both sides here. Now we move to the front cab mounts. And those are going to go right about in there. We're going to utilize that hole there and that hole there. That one has a, looks like a plastic tab in there for the brake line. So we'll pop that out and then get this cleaned up around there. Looks like we'll have to clearance out this tab here for that rivet. Might grind a little bit on the rivet and then probably grind mostly on this. Don't want to hurt the structural integrity of that. So that's about where that will go. We'll mark this up on both sides and get that cleaned up. Got the frame all cleaned up and also had to drill out that hole and that hole. This one drilled out to 1/2 inch and this one down here drilled out to 3/8. Now I'll go ahead and bolt this on the frame. We'll start with that front hole, that going, and then align this rear one. All right, so with that secured on there, go ahead and tack this up and then remove our bracket. Front cab mounts all welded in, both sides, top and inside. Moving on to the rear cab mount. This positions onto the frame just like so. Went ahead and drilled out that hole and that hole to 3/8. Had to remove that bolt, and this remains of the old cab mount. Had to grind down a little more to get some more clearance, but let's set this up on here. Marked out on here where the mount goes. I'll go ahead and clean this up and then get some bolts in here and tack weld it on there. With the cab mounts finished up, now it's time to move on to the bed mounts. For this setup, we're doing a long bed. Short bed's a little bit different, but pretty much the same thing, just different brackets. Have the front bed mount here, which references off of that hole in the frame there, and it sits right on there. We'll end up welding on both sides of that. I'm gonna do this a little differently. I'm gonna clean up all the bracket spots and then do all the welding at one time, since they're pretty much all the same. Have the front mid bed mount, which we'll have to take that bolt out there, and that goes in right there. That there. And we have the mid rear bed mount, which again, there's a, looks like a plastic tab on this side, but that'll reference off of that hole there. And then we have the rear bed mount, which kind of extends past the frame a little bit, but we'll reference off of that hole there, clean up some of this here, and then the top of this tab will sit flush with the top of the frame. And then there's one more bracket that's not shown yet that I'm waiting to get back from getting made. It's just not going to have a hole in it, but it's a rest point for the bed that'll go right about in here, and I think reference off of that hole there. I got 6 of the 8 bed mounts secured onto the frame here, or at least tack welded. Gonna wait till the rear ones till we get all these done. Got these bolted on here with the alignment tab and tack welded. One thing I did, at least for this front, was ran a T-square on here to make sure that was square, and also squared off the outside of the frame here for these 2 brackets. If there's any alignment issue, just kind of bend this tab around a little bit to get it to square up on there. Now that these 6 are tack welded on there, go ahead and run full beads on there and pull off these alignment tabs, and then we'll get to those rear bed mounts. Got these rear brackets finished up. Now it's time to move on to this rear support bracket, which I just showed up. So what this is no bolt hole going through it, but the back of the bed has kind of a rest point that rests down on the frame. So that's what this is gonna support. And again, we got a reference hole right there that we got a tab. And I marked this up, need to clean this up a little bit. Something different that I should have done up front is, since we're gonna be welding within 4 inches of this rivet on the suspension, we're going to cut that out, or grind the head off, knock that out, and replace it with this grade 8 bolt through there. Up front here, it's something I should have done on this cab mount, since there was a rivet we pretty much welded right over. So in the future, if you're doing this, make sure to cut that out and put a bolt in there. So with that welded in there, we need to punch out this rivet. The easiest way I know is to notch it with the cutoff wheel, and then come in with an air hammer and a chisel tip. You knock the head off, come back with the punch, and you punch it out. There's different ways of grinding it off and stuff like that, but this is the easiest way that I found that doesn't damage any of the frame or anything like that. So with that bracket installed, it finishes up this whole frame project. Got the cab mounts, the bed mounts, and the frame shortened on this. Next step will be to put some paint and primer on these so they don't rust, and then get the engine and transmission in here. But before we get to that, going to be testing out another prototype product. Going to be installing these cross members in place of these ones. So originally this would be your spare tire mount. But what we're going to do is put those cross members in, so in the future we can put a gas tank back here. Depending on what your combination is, you'll be able to utilize the factory front tank, or this aftermarket rear tank, or perhaps both, because the beds came in both combinations, either a front tank, a rear tank, or both tanks. So I don't have a tank made yet, but all this is designed so that these will go in place of those cross members, and they'll have some features down here for a tank to bolt in the future. So to do this, got to remove that rivet on both sides, and then some bottom rivets, and then all this crap back here, which we have rear tire hoist. I believe this is like a charcoal canister for the gas tank and emissions and stuff like that. But what we're doing, especially with the diesel, we don't need any of this stuff. So I'll start yanking this out and then get these cross members pulled out of here. So this is the front cross member. You can tell it because it has this leg here, which is going to be on the bottom facing back. Also, I went ahead and drilled out the bottom holes to 9/16. They're really close, but they might have been tight in one spot, so that allows the bolt to pass through easily. So, we'll see how this goes in here. So we're clear on that side, but this side won't go back since it's hitting on, see, I don't know if you can see it, but those two bolts poke through, so I need to take those off, and then that should slide through. So I just got the old cross member out. These rivets put up a good fight, but eventually got it out. This new cross member, these bottom holes a little bit larger, and they actually use the bolts off of the hitch. So it's this one and that one there. So I'm going to try getting it on here with only loosening up this bolt and not that one. We'll see how it goes. I might have to loosen both of them up. Well, there's the finished result. 2 new cross members to square this all up. I'll eventually design and build a fuel tank for this, but right now this was the time to put the cross members in. Overall, turned out pretty good. A few minor changes I'll make, but this should work out good. Now get back to the rest of this. Got the engine set in the frame here and rolled it back inside the shop to take a look at some things. The engine is a 7.3 IDI out of a 1991 Ford F250, and it's mated to a ZF 5-speed. Eventually I'll be taking this back out and not regassing the whole thing, but cleaning it all up, putting some new seals in it, and also getting a turbocharger on here. But this is just to make sure everything fits. It's not fully bolted in. I use Power Stroke motor mounts. They don't fit exactly right, so I'm gonna have to figure out something for that. And also get a different cross member because it needs to bolt right there and the bolt holes are back here. So I need to find a 5-speed cross member off of an earlier SuperDuty, like a 99 to 03 or whenever they had the 5 speeds in there still. It's all looking pretty good so far. Gonna roll the chassis outside, get some motor mount or some cab mounts set on here and get the cab on. But first, before we do that, I gotta pull the steering column flange off the bottom so that we can put a new steering shaft down to the steering box. Truck is back in the shop and I got the cab bolted down. I'll give you a rundown on that. Utilize new rubber body mounts from Dennis Carpenter. Got it set on here with the tractor, and then I went ahead once it was in here, jacked it up a little bit in the corners with the floor jacks and used some ratchet straps and this 2-foot combination square to make sure it was all square all the way around and that the distance side to side was equal. And then once that was done, bolted it on there. Went ahead and got my adapter bracket for the well, this is vacuum boost, but on the website I have brackets for both hydro boost and vacuum boost, so you can go ahead and bolt the factory brake setup on there. Gonna work on a proportioning valve because originally this is the ABS unit, and it takes care of proportioning front and rear. So we're going to ditch that, ditch these lines here. And I think this hard line from this to that union down the frame we're going to replace. So I'm going to get a bracket that holds a new adjustable proportioning valve right here. Hard lines run down to it, and then tie into the rest of this stuff. Got the steering shaft also installed. This is a Borgeson kit. Really, it's 3 separate parts. They got 2 different conversion joints and then a collapsible steering shaft. The plan is to sell it on the website eventually, but right now that is the best setup I found to work with this. Just have to cut this to length, and those just slide on. You got to take off the factory flange on there, and this one down here just unbolts and everything just kind of goes on there simple. Have a 7.3 IDI and a 4-speed in this, well 5-speed, sorry. It is very tight back here. I don't know if you can see that very well. Pretty tight with that passenger or driver's side cylinder head and the firewall. We'll probably end up clearancing that more. Use power stroke motor mounts, but they weren't exactly the right for this, so we'll have to make some motor mounts. Maybe move the engine a little bit farther forward. Got to make some brackets for the crossmember. But right now we're just test fitting this body swap kit. So next step, probably going to go, usually I'd probably put the front clip on, but since I'm waiting on a bracketry and stuff for this, which will be in the way of the inner fenders, gonna go on to the rear bed and get this rolled out and the bed bolted on here. So I got the body all bolted on to the new chassis. It all turned out pretty good, and I think it looks pretty good too. Definitely needs some larger tires. But right now, got it back to our old position here on this flat ground, mostly flat. Gonna jack up the back, level this out, and remeasure our axle center line to see how everything turned out. So I got everything leveled back up here with my laser on the truck. We got our, I don't know if you can see the laser line right here, but there's our old line right there, and it's about 5/16 off, which is pretty good. What it is the cab's back slightly. I want to blame that on the fact that it was a tight fit between the firewall and the engine, and so the cab is pushed as far back as it could to clear some of that. So probably if the engine wasn't in the way, that thing would have came forward just a little bit and centered in the cab mount holes, and that would have been right on. We got another measurement on our bed here, which was supposed to be 6 inches, and again it's about 5/16 off there. So again, I think the cab is back a little bit. Gonna grab that laser and put it on the back here. We had a back mark right there. Go ahead and check that, see what that looks like, and then go on from there. So got the laser set up on the rear axle now. We're center line on the circle there, and we come up here, I don't know if you can see it, the line right here, it's about a 1/16, maybe an 1/8 off. So the bed's just slightly forward. There's room for adjustment for that to go back, and that would help compensate this distance here that we pre-measured to 6 inches. So overall, everything is looking really solid. Everything's right where I want it to be, lined up pretty good. We'll load this back up on the trailer, and I got some 35s we'll put on here, see how that looks. So here's the finished truck, sitting on some 35 1250s. Got it parked next to the other single cab here. Everything's pretty well bolted down, except for the bed, so the body line's a little bit off, but once that's bolted down, that should be resolved. If you're interested in doing a swap like this yourself, I currently have these kits available on my website. Have a single cab and super cab, both long and short bed, and the crew cab kits will be coming soon. Right now it's limited to 05 to 07, but we'll be coming out with 99 to 04 and then 08 and newer. Just a little bit different between the different years, but I'll be working on those. I know this was a longer video than usual, but if you will like it, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and let me know down in the comment section if you have any questions about the kits or anything like that.